Welcome everybody to AI TV. We're broadcasting live from our virtual conference, AI Expo Africa 2020 online. And this is our first interview, and it gives me great pleasure to welcome Fred Werner from the ITU in Geneva. Fred, do you want to introduce yourself to the AI TV viewers?
Yeah, well, thank you, Nick. First of all, thank you for having me. And I wish I could have been there in person, but okay, I attended the whole summit virtually so far, and the experience has been really good, and I've had a great time. And yeah, my name is Fred Werner. I'm from the ITU, that's the International Telecommunication Union, and we're the United Nations Specialized Agency for ICTs. And we're also the organizers of the AI for Good Global Summit, and that's how we came to meet. I believe Nick participated in our summit last year. I had participated in AI Expo Cape Town last year. And now we're both participating in each other's events virtually, and so far so good. So happy to be there. And yeah, the AI for Good Summit, it was created basically on the premise that we have about 10 years left to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. And AI as a technology holds great promise. So if you look at AI and where it can be effective is if we have the 17 Sustainable Development Goals developed by the UN and 193 member states. You have all these different goals and targets centered around life on land, clean air, water, education, gender equality, inclusive societies, cities, and what have you. So basically everything that you would need to take care of to build a sustainable future. And we've seen that AI can positively impact many of those targets. So what we tried to do when we launched the summit 4 years ago was try and create more than just a talk shop, but really use the convening power of the UN to bring together 36 UN sister agencies, to bring together industry, academia, member states, NGOs, civil society, even artists and athletes. The logic being that the AI experts themselves would say that AI is too important to leave to the experts themselves. So what we wanted to do was bring as many people to the table as possible, but more than that, be action-oriented. So the goal of the summit is really to identify practical applications of AI to advance the Sustainable Development Goals and generate AI for good projects. And even though the summit started, I'd say it was a modest start, it quickly grew. It doubled, tripled in size, and now going virtual, it's scaled exponentially. We're reaching many more people around the world. But I like to think that it also delivered on its action-oriented promise in the sense that it's created a number of initiatives. So one is the AI for Health focus group collaboration between ITU, WHO, and a number of different industry players, both from the tech community, from healthcare and research and what have you. And they're trying to establish a benchmark for the evaluation of the efficacy of AI for health algorithms. So if you look at it, I mean, there's a lot of AI-powered apps on your phone for healthcare that go up on the iTunes store every day. But they and some of these are widely used as well. But compared to drug development, where you might have like a 10-year development process, lots of testing, you have the FDA, no such system is in place for basically trying to see how effective different apps and algorithms are involved in healthcare are. So that's one thing the group's trying to do. We also created the AI and autonomous and assisted driving focus group. So again, at last year's summit, we had a track on smart mobility, and a lot of the participants called on the ITU to create a global platform to basically establish what would be the equivalent of a driving license for autonomous vehicles. So there's a lot of good, let's say, pre-standardization efforts happening there.
I was going to ask you a quick question there, Fred, on standards. I mean, I've come from a standards background myself, not anything really to do with AI, but standards is the ITU's bag. That's your bread and butter, right? So where do you see the role of the ITU with regards to standards? I mean, we start to see now a lot more dialogue around, the need to measure accuracy, precision, bias in algorithmic-based systems. So can you give us where the state of the art is at the moment and what's happening with standards?
Yeah, well, I mean, first of all, I think with AI, everything is still new to create, set standards for AI. I mean, there's that standardization sweet spot where if you standardize too early, you might inhibit innovation. And if you
Yeah.
standardize too late, you encourage vendor lock-in, right? So I think we're well beyond either of those scenarios. But what we've launched are what we call focus groups, which are pre-standardization efforts. So they essentially, it's an open platform, no membership involved. You try to attract as many stakeholders as possible, and they'll basically look at the lay of the land, see what are future standardization requirements, what's the taxonomy, what are the definitions, what are the frameworks, what are the benchmarks, best practices, and try and paint a picture for the industry, if you will, so that at the right time, that their research, or let's say the work they did as a focus group, might lead into formal standardization process. So all of these groups I mentioned are new. A focus group typically has a 2-year shelf life. It can be extended, and I think some of them will be. So I would say there's just a lot of really important pre-standardization efforts happening now at ITU. We have another group on AI and energy efficiency and emerging technologies. And then also what we call the Global Initiative on AI and Data Commons, which is basically looking at, what are the preconditions for scaling AI for good, both from a data sharing perspective, open algorithms, sandboxes, collaboration, connecting people. And all of this comes from the summit. I mean, this isn't ITU that invented this. So, the summit's an open platform, 36 agencies, 145 countries. The people who come to the summit use the platform to put these ideas forth, and it's our job to, put a frame around it so it can actually take a shape and a life, if you will. And so that's just a few examples of what came out of the ITU. But of course, there's a lot of things that happen organically at the summit. And I'd like to think one of the organic things that happened at the summit is the collaboration with AI Expo Africa, what we've done together, because thanks to you and your organization, we've really increased African participation a lot. I mean, it was a bit tricky when we had a physical event to physically fly to Geneva. There's a high cost, but through our collaboration, we've been in touch with many more people. We've had presentations, data challenges with Cindy, for example. We had your ICT minister not too long ago on one of our platforms, which got a lot of attention.
Stella opened the show today as well. So look, I mean, just to wrap it up, Fred, we'd like to keep our kind of AI TV segments to about 10 minutes, but I mean, it's clear there's a wealth. Every time I talk to you, it's the energy that comes from you about what's happening. I mean, I think the key thing is, we are at the beginning, and I think where you are with standards and where we are with the technology, it has such an exciting future, and I think we are at this sort of real new dawn, I guess. But if we just to conclude, I mean, clearly you were talking today in your talk about moving the needle. Can you just really wrap up with a couple of sentences really around how moving the needle for Africa looks from a sort of ITU perspective with where you are now in the journey?
Certainly, yeah. So I think we've seen through the summit and our focus groups that there's no shortage of use cases, so useful applications of AI in different settings, whether it's for healthcare or for agriculture or for driving or for energy consumption. But it's one thing to have these use cases sort of in an exhibit hall or developed in a high-tech lab in a developed country. It's another thing to actually deploy these things, probably in the countries that need them the most, in developing countries across 50 African countries, with all the challenges that entail, right? So you have societal issues, funding issues, harsh conditions on the ground, simple things like tamper-proof or battery life or water,
electricity,
electricity, as you said.
As we found this morning when South Africa had a power cut.
Yeah, the basics are there. So
it's real. It's real.
Yeah, so really getting an understanding of the context beyond the technology is really important, and that's why we try to bring so many people together. And also, it's how can we scale this? So all the use cases are there, but how do you scale that so you can actually help millions of people? And that's what we're trying to do in the AI and data commons, is really try, what are the preconditions for scaling, like making it as widespread as, ordering an Uber or something. It should be that easy, but it's not yet. So I think that's where, the challenge lays, and what people are working on and what we'd be focusing on in the future is that scaling aspect.
Well, that's great, Fred. I mean, scaling anything in Africa, irrespective of the infrastructural and societal issues, people really don't understand how large Africa is. I mean, it's a massive, massive continent. And I think the great thing we're trying to do with the ITU, with you, myself, what we're trying to do with our communities is shorten that gap and bring people together. We've got a 6-year vision on what we're doing, and we're into our 3rd year. We've trebled the numbers since we've started our journey in 2018. So have you. And yeah, the more conversations we have and the more people we get involved, this show will live on for another 30 days. We're hoping to get 15,000 people through the platform. They'll see your talk. They'll see all the other 81 speakers. They'll see the vendor stands. And really, that's what we want to try and do. You and us together is inspire people to get involved and seize the 4IR opportunity. And I really want to thank you for your contribution, inviting us to the event last year in Geneva. And yeah, I'm just looking forward to what we can do after the show. So thanks very much for joining us today, Fred.
And like you said, it's only the beginning, and happy to walk the journey with such a nice partner as AI Africa. It's probably a hard road, but it's easier if you have some good friends. So thanks for the good collaboration. Thanks for having me. And yeah, looking forward to more.
That's great. Thanks, Fred. Appreciate your time.